You know, that's about anybody who's been involved in unions knows that's what you've got to face. Right? Not because it's horrible, that's what you should have to face. You know, when I talk about standing on the worker's wage, it's because most of our activists lose money being an activist, they lose time being an activist, they get shouted at being activists, and one of the most depressing things is being shouted at for something that's not your fault. A 0% pay rise, a cut in the pension scheme. And that's because there's no democracy in the union. And in the branches, the activists are getting fried alive by pressure, by councils, by employers, by cuts. And they're looking to the union for a leadership. And as I said on Thursday, I don't want to be that person. I want to be third in the queue in the leadership. But sometimes it just falls where it falls. And I think it's a really important election. And I think it's a winnable election. I have never lost an election where the members can vote. Ever in 36 years, I've lost loads of elections where representatives can vote and full-time officials can vote, but I've never lost an election where the members can vote. And one of the reasons for that is the activists think that we might be getting somewhere. I think that's really important. It ain't just a question of who's got the most nominations or who speaks the best. I think you've got to have some moral belief in the candidate. I think if you're going to go out and campaign for anybody in anything, you've got to think this person's worth going out for. You've got to think that. If you don't think that, you do it with a heavy heart, don't you? And you don't go the extra mile. And that's what this election's about. It's about a campaign. It's quite touching and humbling. People who know me know that I don't like asking people for money. But I haven't got £10,000. I haven't got it. One of the things that always amuses me about meeting management when we take industrial action in Kirklees or official action, they always say, well, if you realise if it's unofficial, we can sue you for every penny you've got. Well, that always amuses me. The blood drops from the faces of the full-time officials because they've obviously got something. But it's the old saying, isn't it? If you want £1 million off me, I'm not worried. But if you want £25 off me, I'm really, really worried. And it's humbling when people say to me, I said, well, go and do some leaflet, that's really difficult. Or I'll take the day off next week, and if the car's available, I'll take some leaflets. And it's really, really humbling. It's stuff like that. I think we ought to get down to nitty-gritty, really. You know, I think sometimes we get too introverted and too insular. We need to go out and do what we do. And initially I was thinking a fortnight ago, well, if a number of people could go and leaflet their own workplace where they work, that'd be really helpful. But then I started thinking, well, I have to go and leaflet other workplaces, because we want to know somebody at them workplaces. And then I thought, they'll have to use internal mails in situations to places where they know what the addresses are, but obviously don't use union resources, but you know what the addresses are, you can shift stuff about. Then I thought, well, actually, in a working week, let me sit down and think where I come across Unison members in my private life. When I visit somebody in hospital, when I go to the library, when I go to the swimming pool, when you go to the benefits office, they're all over the shop. 1 in 6 TUC members is a Unison member. And you don't think that sometimes. You know, when you're walking past somebody who's street sweeping, or a bin wagon operative, or a park gardener, the Unison members are everywhere. And I think you should have 50 copies of the leaflet with you at all times. And I think there's a potency there among the membership that we can tap into. And some people accuse me of being anti-middle class, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. But I think when you've been talking down to as much as I have over the years, you get to understand sometimes the hidden injuries of class. And I spoke at a meeting in Hebden Bridge, and for people who know me and know Hebden Bridge, there's no sacrifice I made to speak at that meeting. I did start off by saying, this didn't go down well at all. If you want to live in a weaver's cottage, I think you should do 18 hours weaving a day. But it was interesting because both my daughters and my daughter's boyfriend were at the meeting, and there was another young lad there, and there was a discussion, and somebody walked in. I'll be honest, I might as well be honest, wasn't it? It was Bernie Gallagher's husband, Ken, and he's a very quiet person. I think people know Martin, he's a really quiet person. And they asked for contributions, and Martin said, well, the Green candidate's spoken, and some of the Labour Party's spoken, have gone on and on about climate change. And I've got to tell you, all the canvassing and leafleting, I'm a teacher, the canvassing and leafleting I've done in Bolton, no young person has ever mentioned climate change. They've all mentioned jobs and job security in the future and housing. That's what they mentioned. And there was a tirade against Martin from the Green Party candidate and one or two of the Labour parties that he didn't know what young people were saying. So we asked the young people in the meeting what they thought about it, and they all said, Nobody's ever spoke to, none of my mates have ever mentioned climate change. They want to know if we're going to have a job or not. And I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong. I'm saying some people assume what some people are talking about when they need to talk to them about what they're talking about. Because what our members are talking about is being frightened, being anxious and being angry. And the percentage goes up and down depending on what leadership they're given. And we leafleted, well I did myself, but people in Kirklees leafleted on Friday morning. I spoke to one or two people who've been leafleting town centre workplaces. And there's some enormous numbers of white collar workers in local government working town centre workplaces. Kirklees Union's has got 3,000 members inside Huddersfield Ring Road. You can't walk more than 300 yards and you'll be outside the Ring Road with 3,000 members there. And people were genuinely receptive that somebody cared, that somebody were giving something out. 99% wouldn't know there was an election coming, but somebody was out there in their own time leafleting their work, and people like that. They like to see that somebody's interested. And one steward said at the meeting in Leeds on Wednesday night, well, I'm a bit worried really, Prentice has sent all these packs out, and he's sent loads of stickers out. Why haven't we got any stickers? And I thought, oh, I've not thought about any stickers, you know what I mean? And this lad says, I'll give you £1 for every ordinary member I see you wearing a vote day Prentice. And I think the election is really, really winnable. I think the election's got to be about the economy, but the effect that the economy has on our members, because you were absolutely spot on. It's the point I made the other week when I was speaking. Why is there a crisis? If you don't watch it, and it had an effect in blue-collar workers during the CCT in the 90s. It has an effect. Can the employer afford it? Whether you think it has an effect or not, it has an effect. If a workforce think the company's made profits, or that they've been allocated money, or there's money swimming about, they're more confident than they are if they think the company's losing money. And the fact of the matter is, you will never find out whether they're losing money or not, because it doesn't work like that. Thatcher tried to convince people that it's about the domestic budget and spending money at the supermarket, but it's far more complicated than that. You know, anybody goes back to Lord Vestey 20 years ago, who was one of the richest men in Britain, and he paid £10 income tax. People couldn't understand that, because they don't see that reflected in their own lives. And what we've got to say to people is, there's been no crop failure. There's been no collapse of industry because something rusted or there's been a nuclear leak. What there's been is a giant fiddle that you don't know if there's a crisis or not. You haven't a clue. An accountant in our branch said to me, Paul, I don't know why there's a problem with the deficit, because I'm an accountant. Wherever there's a deficit, there's a surplus somewhere else. You know, if there's a deficit here, then where's the surplus? The surplus is going to somebody else. And the fourth biggest pension scheme in Britain, in the world, is the local pension scheme. And that's what they're going to come looking for now. They don't want to invest. They've turned Britain into a service economy. They've tried to convince people that somehow they're better off. And let's be absolutely clear on this. Absolutely clear. Conditions for working people in mines, in docks, in textiles are exactly the same as they were in Dickens' times. They're just not in this country. The British ruling class are doing the same thing as they did in the 1880s. They're just doing it to other countries' working populations, and they're trying to screw the service people in this country. That's what they're trying to do. And that's why the bureaucracy in this union is so hostile to me. I'll talk separately outside this meeting about some of the threats that's been made to me, because I don't want to end up making official complaints in this election. I've deliberately kept away from criticising other candidates, and I'm not interested in that. But it's taken a toll on my family, I've got to tell you that. Endless attacks on websites, particularly young people like my two teenage daughters, that say that I'm racist, that I'm homophobic, I'm anti-disabled, I'm a cheat, the membership figures are a lie in the branch. Take a toll on people who don't know the game, don't they? They absolutely take a toll. And you don't respond to that. I just ignored it all because I'm not interested. Because you've got to inspire the activists. That's how you counter that, not by getting involved in some tittle-tattle and he's done this and she's done that sort of situation. You've got to inspire the activists, and that is our role over the next 2 or 3 weeks. It's for me to inspire you, I don't mean that in a crude sense, and it's for you to go out there and say, there's an election worth winning. Now, last time, only 16% of the membership thought the election was worth having. We've got to at least double that. If we double that turnout, we will win this election, because nobody else is interested in increasing the turnout. And I have made no personal attacks on Roger Bannister in this election, and I won't be doing today. But it is embarrassing that I've been to the toilet twice today.